Today we meet Jenny Smith, a highly qualified and skilled First Nation woman who was psychologically injured at work. Jenny bravely shares her horrific experiences subsequent to her injury of how the workers' compensation system has treated her rather than help her heal. At the heart of Jenny's story is there is no single way a person exists in the world, nor is there a single mechanism through which inequalities are produced at institutional and systemic levels. Rather, as Jenny talks to, these intersections are themselves the result of systemic, structural, and institutionalized patterns of power and privilege. With me, Jenny Smith, who has been through the workers' compensation system. And Jenny is a person of First Nation who identifies as a First Nation person. She has quite a story to tell. So, Jenny, tell me about how the system hasn't supported you.
They haven't supported me at all, really. They did the bare minimum as far as my claim was concerned, because I went through quite a significant traumatic event which resulted in death threats and having to relocate several times to protect myself and my family. And it was just even trying to help them understand the seriousness of it and to take me seriously with the needs that we had just for our basic safety, let alone the emotional and psychological impact on myself and my family. They just had no idea. Do
you think that was something that was beyond a case manager? Because offline I've heard your story. How would somebody with no major allied health training or mental health training, how would they understand what you were continuing to go through, even whilst on a claim?
Well, I think part of it was that they didn't really listen or take me seriously, for starters. Like any basic human being would be horrified and shocked at what we went through, and for them not to even give any credibility to that. You know, you don't need to be a qualified professional to have some empathy and compassion, for starters. There was a lot of things playing out in the social media space, and I was monitoring it closely because it was very close to home, where I was living at the time, and their answer to that was, "We'll just stop looking." And my response was, well, putting my head in the sand and not looking isn't actually going to protect me or my family and keep us safe. I need to be aware. And even my previous employer, we asked them to set up a system where they could have somebody monitoring for us, and they wouldn't do it. So, you know, having threats of your home being bombed by Molotov cocktails and,
serious.
Yeah, it was serious, and it just blows my mind. You know, they did the basics, but anything that I needed over and above the basic, work cover claim was just not happening.
So let's just talk a little bit about that in terms of the basics, and were you expecting more? So the basics were you got a nominal amount of weekly wages, and because you don't get your full wages, and people often think that, but it's not true. And also you got some medical expenses paid. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah, pretty much that was it. The first GP that I went to actually wanted to send me straight back to work. So, and at the time, luckily I had a good union rep, and he just said to me, "That's not okay. You need to go and get some further support." And he helped me get a referral to my treating psychiatrist, who ended up being a major support to me throughout the whole process. He understood it. He was fantastic. But luckily I had a good treating team in the end, but every step of the process, I had to find people to help support me, because the case manager that I was allocated, and they would change frequently without notice, did not provide anything in terms of what I needed to do next, or how to get help and support in terms of my recovery. If anything, they worked against me, and it was a constant battle, which for someone who was in my state of mind and, you know, that survival mode, it was just overwhelming.
So you were diagnosed with depression? Is that what the diagnosis?
Yeah, so initially it was adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression. Then I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And then after that, I also was diagnosed with ADHD for the first time in my life. I hadn't ever, well, all of that I hadn't been diagnosed with before, but yeah, the ADHD was a shock as well.
So whilst, I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder can be incredibly debilitating, and particularly when you weren't feeling safe in your environment or even through a claim process.
Mm-hmm.
Did people, you know, you've said that you didn't get any support on the claim, but did they understand how serious this was?
No, I think I felt as though they were minimizing it in their minds or for their purposes. Anything that happened, like the threats, all of those things, pretty much their answer was repeatedly, just stop looking, and, you know, like, you don't understand. This is something that has created like a real lack of safety, not just within myself, but in my physical environment. My former employer, they did provide security for the first couple of weeks, and eventually they agreed to put cameras on the home, but there was nothing, those cameras weren't connected to anything other than our Wi-Fi. So even if anything happened, there was no means of, you know, there was no, you know how some systems you can get that call out from security, or there was nothing attached to it. So really all it would have done is provided some footage. But other than that, you know, this was real. It was real. And I was recognized in public on several occasions. And that was really unnerving, because you just did not know who was following the situation and who was out to get me. It was, and even today, I still feel that worry and that risk around that.
So did anyone more senior than a case manager, and a series of case managers at that, from the insurer ever contact you and saying, we're going to keep a close eye on this claim? Did no one ever stepped in?
No, never.
Culturally sensitive and culturally safe. Did you feel the system supported your story, your heritage, and was culturally safe?
No, they have no idea about any of that. It wasn't even a question. They did not even ask the question. It was never talked about.
So you don't recall anyone ever asking you, and I gather you're in a stress state as well anyway, do you identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander?
They knew that much, but but if they did not ever ask me what my needs were around my cultural safety, and that was a big part of this whole situation. Like, I can't go into it because of the confidentiality of it, but that was a significant component of what I went through. And the only person or people that got it were my family and community. And actually my treating psychiatrist was really good with that. He actually tried to get me reimbursed for travel to reconnect with my community, because he could see that it was beneficial to me, and the insurer declined. They would not cover any of that. They did not. Yeah, he could see, like, I don't know how many times I traveled to my community just to get away and to get that support and nurturing that I needed. It was at least once a month, and they wouldn't pay for it. Yeah.
Where are you with your treatment now? Are you getting treatment, or are you still, because of money, and it's all getting out of control?
So when they cut off my payments and then the treatment, that meant that my medication reviews weren't happening for the ADHD diagnosis. I was without medication for quite a while because it requires a psychiatrist to make those, to issue those scripts. It took quite some time to figure out, because I can't afford $500 per appointment. That's how much it costs for a psychiatrist. And then the medication on top of that is over $100 a month. Like, I've got to be able to eat and put fuel in the car. Like, the cost of living at the moment, there's just no money to be able to pay for those things. So luckily, my treating doctor was able to get consent from Medicare to provide those scripts to me, because she had worked closely with my psychiatrist over the time of my treatment. But by the time all of that was put back in place, it had already impacted me quite significantly, and I just haven't been able to maintain the business at the level that it was. So I've lost a lot of money this year. This year has been awful. Yeah.
I tend to find when you constantly put trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma of people that are already struggling with an injury, it gets to a point that it's just overwhelmed, and you almost need time out totally just to try and get yourself together to start again. Do you feel that way?
Yes. Yeah. And I was building this business in the middle of a pandemic. You know, I got back up to 30 hours a week. And it got too much because I just couldn't maintain that. We dropped back down again, and then they decided that I was well enough to do it on my own. Instead of giving me the support to carry through all of that hard work and make sure that the stability of my business was maintained, and it's all just gone to shit. Sorry for swearing, but
there's a common pattern in all these stories of professional women who are well educated that are just thrown on the garbage heap when they're injured and need support.
Yeah, I do. I have quite a few qualifications. I have a degree, I have postgraduate certificate, I have my training and assessment, diploma in early childhood. I've done art therapy. I am well qualified to run a successful business. And it took me a long time to build up my toolbox of skills and qualifications, and it's all just been thrown out with this whole situation. They didn't see the value of that at all.
So this was not an insignificant injury, and it was not an insignificant event. And on the screen, I've got a short précis for everyone to see, but we will not be discussing the details because of Jenny's safety. How has this impacted you economically?
I think I can't even explain how devastating it has been financially. I've gone from earning over $100,000 a year to now not even getting an income because they've cut my treatment, they've cut my payments because they decided based on one report that I have not been impacted. They have accepted liability for my claim, but they believe I have made a full recovery and have full capacity to be able to return to my previous role, which I don't. It's not safe for me to do so. And I'm at the point now where I'm negotiating with the bank over my car payments, because I can't make them. I can't meet my repayments. We're living in a caravan on a block of land. So we're rent free, thankfully, but I'm not getting a regular income, and I haven't ever since they withdrew all the supports, including my psych, all of those things that I needed. I nearly got myself fully back to work in as a sole trader, and it's all just fallen down around me because they did not see that I needed the ongoing treatment and support to maintain my business that I had worked so hard to build against all the odds of it, all the barriers they put in place. That's the only way I can explain it. They just consistently put barriers, even though they could see I was actively trying my hardest to get back on my feet and to be responsible for my own income and my well-being and my employment.
So do you think it was intentional? I mean,
Yeah. It has to be. It doesn't make sense. If they are trained professionals and that is the way they approach this kind of situation, it's criminal. You know, it's
I will share with everyone that you were a first responder. So to actually try and start a business or try and start to take some control and have some economic viability is a really big deal. Did you do any extra training, and was that paid for? Or how did you try and navigate all of this?
I actually tried to go back to, I didn't want to go back, but it was required that I try to go back to my previous role. I did that on reduced hours for 11 months. And when I went back to that workplace, I was mistreated in the sense that they isolated me from everybody. They accused me of bringing negativity into the work environment, which I didn't even discuss what I'd been through and what was going on, because it wasn't the time and place. They told my colleagues to stay away. They wouldn't let them reach out to me. My direct supervisor was also told, you focus on everyone else, we'll support Nicole. And in doing that, they isolated me and I did not get the support. I was isolated and left with nothing. So after 11 months, I couldn't do it anymore. It was just, it actually felt like it was a domestic violence relationship. And I spoke to my treating psychiatrist about it. I said, they have treated me so badly and now I'm expected to trust them and go back into what is an unhealthy environment. And I know this is going to cause further harm and distress to my well-being. So after that, I just decided that I needed to take charge of my life and my ability to earn income. And I asked the insurer, I put the question forward, will you cover me to retrain? And they said no, they would not. So I had to go through, the work capacity assessments and all of those sorts of things. And in the end, I paid for my own retraining and then fought to have it reimbursed, which they did, which was about $1,200 for one short course that I did, and then built my business up. Without their support, they then had a go at me because I couldn't provide pay slips and prove the hours I was doing, and I couldn't prove my earnings being a small business. They were still paying me at that point, but then one phone call, I said to them that I was the only income earner and I needed them to make sure I had the support and the right amount of pay. And as soon as they found that out, all of a sudden there was issues with them paying me every fortnight. The money wouldn't go in, and but we can't calculate your hours and we can't calculate your true income. And they just were putting all of this pressure on me, and it's been ongoing. And 5 years down the track, I've gone from earning a really good solid wage to nothing.
Do you wish you'd never heard of workers' compensation?
Yeah, it's just evil. It's meant to be there for workers, and all it does is line the pockets of the people on the other side who are playing cat and mouse with us. Like, it's almost sick. It's sickening. It is. It's sickening. They're benefiting off our situations, and it's just not right.
So Jenny, how is your family coping?
It's really hard. It's been really hard on my family, especially since they decided, meaning the insurer, to cut my benefits and then without notice my treatment as well. So all of the support that I had is gone. So, you know, my family are picking up the pieces, and I feel like a burden. I really do. And they're beautiful, and I know they love me, but it's not right. You know.
Jenny, you're valuable, you're important, and your story is really important, because it's not okay. It's just not. So Jenny, if you were to look down the camera and tell the Premier, which is one thing, which is what all these conversations are about, to say this is just not working and it's certainly economically disadvantaging women, what would you say?
I would say to him, you have a responsibility as the Premier of this state to make sure that injured workers are supported, are not financially disadvantaged by incompetent workers who are employed by the government and some of these insurance companies, but also to make sure that we are not financially disadvantaged and targeted in this way when we're doing everything we can to get our lives back. And not only that, this whole system is set up for us to fail. And on top of that, as First Nations people, we already battle the system in so many ways. And this is just one thing on top of another, and it's not okay.
Thanks for talking to us, Jenny. I'll stay in touch.